Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're dusting off a fascinating piece from the Indian Express all the way back from 1990. And honestly, it completely flips everything you thought you knew about overpopulation right on its head.
For decades, we've basically been conditioned to view our expanding numbers as this ticking time bomb, right? Like it's a direct one-way street to resource depletion and poverty. But this source actually asks us to hit pause, zoom out a bit, and shift our perspective totally away from those usual doomsday scenarios. I mean, what if having more people actually means having way more potential?
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with what drives economic development, then look at the Malthusian doomsday warning, rethink the population problem, check out some evidence from the real world, and finally, look at a new path forward.
All right, Section 1. What actually drives economic development?
Well, economic development is this really complex process, and it's basically built on four main pillars. You've got your natural resources, capital, socio-political institutions, and finally, human resources. That's us. And for the rest of this explainer, we're going to focus entirely on that fourth pillar. You see, population stands out because it's literally the only factor that acts as both the ultimate consumer of products and the dynamic agent actually creating those products in the first place.
Now, when development economists talk about human resources, they definitely aren't just doing a simple head count. Quality is absolutely what matters here. We're talking about things like skills, health, attitudes, enterprise, the whole shebang. Because if you just view population as a number, well, you're only going to see mouths to feed. But if you view it through the lens of quality, suddenly you're looking at the ultimate engine of production. A skilled, healthy population is exactly what transforms potential resources into actual, tangible wealth.
And you know, this really isn't a new idea. Historical thinkers, from Jeremy Bentham to Karl Marx, they argued that living human labor is the absolute root of all wealth, income, and surplus generation. Later economists actually proved the math on this too. The takeaway? Humans aren't just some byproduct of the economy, we are literally the ones building it from the ground up.
Moving on to Section 2, the Malthusian doomsday warning.
So where did all the fear come from? It actually goes all the way back to the Industrial Revolution and a classical economist named T.R. Malthus. He was essentially the ultimate 19th century buzzkill. Malthus looked at the math of human reproduction and, well, he got very worried. He warned that population grows geometrically, meaning it multiplies super rapidly, while our means of subsistence, farming and food production, those only grow really slowly. So to Malthus, an expanding population definitely wasn't an engine. Instead, he saw it as this massive, heavy drag holding back all development efforts. He basically framed population growth as a fast track to absolute societal impoverishment.
The wild part is, this Malthusian fear didn't just stay in textbooks. It became real-world global policy. I mean, the 1985 World Development Report literally stated, a war on poverty would simply have to be a war on population. How crazy is that? The prevailing wisdom totally became this idea that you absolutely have to control numbers before you can ever achieve growth. In fact, our source article notes that entire planning commissions would explicitly blame their failure to meet economic targets entirely on the failure to control the population.
Okay, let's jump to Section 3, rethinking the population problem.
As you might guess, this created a massive clash of economic theories. On the one hand, you've got the Malthusian fear, right? More people inevitably equals doom. But heavily pushing back against that is the Marxian argument. They say blaming population is honestly just a convenient excuse for failure. From this viewpoint, the real root of mass poverty isn't too many people. Actually, scratch that. It's oppressive, inefficient social institutions that are completely failing to harness the potential of those people. So really, it boils down to a massive debate of biology versus system design.
And it gets more interesting. Back in the 1940s, post-Keynesian economists ran the numbers and found something pretty incredible. If you take technology out of the equation for just a second, the absolute maximum growth rate an economy can possibly achieve is entirely dictated by the growth of its labor force. So more hands don't just take up space. Mathematically speaking, they actually raise the ceiling on what a society can achieve.
Which brings us to Section 4, evidence from the real world.
So economist P.T. Bauer looked at the actual geographical data, and it completely shattered conventional wisdom. Just think about places like Hong Kong or Singapore. They have incredible population density and virtually no natural land to speak of, yet they became highly prosperous. Conversely, if you look at places with massive open spaces and historically low density, they often struggled with extreme poverty. The math here is pretty clear, right? Empty space simply does not equal wealth.
So why the huge discrepancy? Well, Bauer argued that prosperity actually depends on human adaptability. It's about our personal qualities, our sociopolitical setups, our technology. These doomsday forecasts, they falsely assume humans are just static, helpless creatures who are totally incapable of adapting to their circumstances. But time and time again throughout history, we literally innovate our way out of scarcity.
Furthermore, the source highlights this really common trap where we try to force the Western demographic transition theory onto the developing world. That's the theory where birth rates naturally dropped as Europe got richer back in the 19th century. But you know what? You simply cannot just copy and paste 19th century Western history onto modern developing nations. The initial conditions, the available resources, the whole global context, it's all vastly different today.
All right, last part. Section 5, a new path forward.
Now, you might have actually heard this famous phrase before. Economic development is the best contraceptive. And while that definitely holds true over generations, like as societies become wealthier and more educated, birth rates do naturally decline, the author makes a great point. We can't just sit back and passively wait for the quote-unquote miracle of development to lower birth rates organically. But on the flip side, we also can't halt all development while trying to artificially force population numbers down.
So the real solution requires completely breaking out of this chicken or egg waiting game. We have to fiercely pursue economic development while implementing family welfare and skills training programs at the exact same time. These absolutely aren't conflicting goals. They are deeply complementary efforts that have to run in parallel.
Ultimately, population is neither a demon nor a savior on its own. It's really a neutral yet super dynamic force. Its impact depends entirely on the specific stage of a country's economic development and, crucially, how actively a society adapts its systems to harness its people.
So, I want to leave you all with this final question to chew on. Will we adapt our social institutions to finally harness the immense potential of our people? Or are we going to take the easy way out and just continue to falsely blame the size of our population for our own systemic failures? The choice is definitely ours. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, keep questioning that conventional wisdom.